All right, so let's start with Colombia then. The U.S. men's national team lost the opening game of their slate of games 5-1 in what is probably the worst performance in recent USMNT history. Or was it? Connor, I want to start it with you and let me know kind of what you thought about the game. I'm sure you watched all the 90 minutes and then watched the post game and then went on Twitter and read through all the comments, and I'm sure you got it all ready to go. So what do you got?
Oh yeah, pregame too. Like I was watching stuff on this like weeks in advance because I was just so excited. I mean, I think there's probably some part of it that is an over exaggeration, and there's probably a part of it that is like valid criticism that people are making towards. I think a lot of it obviously is towards Greg. I mean, he will always have the criticism. He will always bear like the brunt of anything that goes wrong with the team. But I think there's just general like good criticism towards the team. Obviously, Colombia is a team that's in incredible form. I mean, unbeaten for like I think almost years at this point. Like I think it's spanned multiple seasons that they've been unbeaten now. So it's a very informed Colombia team and definitely not a team to sleep on. And I think the team came out flat-footed and got beat. I mean, they got beat tactically, they got beat just in ability. I know a lot of the talk was about the US having possession, 53% possession, it looks like. So more of the ball, not an incredible amount more, but Colombia still had way more shots, 15 shots, seven big chances created. So even with less of the ball, they were able to do more. So just kind of saying a lot about the US having the ball and just not really doing anything with it. And again, that probably comes down to the tactical part of the game and why a lot of people I think have a justifiable reason for why they don't like Greg being in charge because this isn't the first time that something like this has happened. It's not the first time the US has seen a lot of the ball. It happens a lot when we play other CONCACAF teams because the US has so much more talent. They get the ball more often. And yet I feel like we watch so many games where this team is just unable to score goals. I mean, we saw with the last World Cup. The team was just incapable of scoring goals. And I feel like that was the result again here. The only difference was that normally we're pretty solid defensively, where in this case we got exploited constantly on the counter. So it was like a culmination of a lot of things going wrong at the same time, and it resulted in a really bad result on paper, and probably raises a lot of fair questions. But I do think at the same time it is just one game, and I want to be hopeful for the team heading into Copa America. So I want to say that hopefully this is a fluke result and that we get to see more results like we did in the Brazil game after this one.
I I agree with some of what you said, but not a ton of it. We talked in the group chat about the game a whole bunch. And even after 45 minutes and we were down 2-0, we all had this sort of feeling like it wasn't a good showing, right? We're losing the game, but it wasn't bad. Like it didn't feel bad, right? So I watched it back, and tactically in the first half, we got picked apart in transition, right? But it didn't, they didn't hurt us on those chances. Maybe we get a little bit lucky. Sure, that's the game, but I think we had a bit of an over reliance on creation from wide play, and I mean, we talk about that all the time. Where I think he even came out at halftime after the game. He's like, "Yeah, we just need to work on being patient and crossing the ball more." Well, wide play doesn't. Wide play is not one of those things where it's like, "Oh, if you do more of it, more good things will happen." Right? Like that's not usually how that happens. So tactically, I can agree. In the first half, I think we struggled a little bit matching up. Right? We had Florian Balogun in there who doesn't win the ball in the air very well against Davinson Sanchez and players like that who are very very strong. Our service wasn't that great either, to be completely truthful. And what we tried to do is keep the ball. We tried in possession to get our wingbacks high to create overloads in the wide areas. And then when we lost the ball, inevitably, because we either had a poor service or we didn't keep the ball well, we're now getting countered. Tactically, that was poor. Now, there's also, and you kind of mentioned it, this flip that, by the way, this is a friendly, right? We're trying to see what works and what doesn't. Quite clearly, that didn't work. That being said, even with it not working, up until 75 minutes, we were only down by a goal, and we had the better of the play for flows of the game. Right, we created the first like two chances of the match. Florian Balogun had a shot from out wide, and I mean, I think like a half chance after that. Um, then we realize, okay, we're going to try and get into our defensive shape. We're going to try and sit into a 4-5-1 mid block. We're going to cut the space in between the lines, and we're going to try and force them to play out wide and deal with the service, right? Well, we get into this defensive shape. They find the ball into James Rodriguez. One of the first times they do it, he plays the ball through, and Jedi Robinson puts it right in the path of their striker, who reacts the fastest and tucks it away. We're down 1-0, right? Could we have changed our pressing shape? Maybe, but that's not really a tactic thing to me. That's a freak, whatever, right? But even after that play, right, we go down the other end, and Balogun gets in behind. He puts a shot on. It's cleared off the line. Like that thing bounces the right way. We're even again, right? So it's not like we were completely out of it. 5-1, I don't think tells us what that game was up until the very end. Did you have a feeling when we were watching the game like we were like screwed up until, I mean, the end of the game? Like up through the first half, did you feel okay?
I mean, considering it was 2-1 for 75 minutes, it's hard to say like, especially when you have more of the ball and the score is 2-1. I don't necessarily feel like there would be a lot of situations where you feel like you're out of the game or you've been like completely run off the field. But then it was just like clearly at the end of the game, the last 15 or so minutes is kind of where like I think,
It falls apart.
yeah,
No, for
the
sure.
brakes kind
And
of fall.
we're gonna get into that in a second. But like, then again, 19 minutes, we're trying to play out of the back. It's something Greg really likes to do is play out of the back. And I think we can do it. We need to be better at it, but we can do it. We have the ability to do it. But they're trying to play out of the back. Tim Ream, who hasn't played in what 2-3 months before that first game because of injury and whatever, he gives the ball straight away. He has to recover. It goes out for a corner. Then on the corner kick, they go in and they score that crazy bicycle kick, right? Would Turner have done better? Sure. But again, you can put that on Greg's tactics of saying play out of the back. But the second we just start launching the ball high, right? Who are we launching it to? Right? Everybody's like, oh, just play it direct, play it direct. Who are we launching it to? Florian Balogun, Christian Pulisic, Gio Reyna. Which one of those guys is winning a header over any center back? None of them, right? I mean, Pulisic, maybe he fights a little bit. Weston McKennie likes to win the ball in the air, but at the end of the day, that's not how this team is built to play, right? We don't have a Peter Crouch up top just because I just listened to his podcast, the first name that came up in my head, right? A Christian Benteke, right? We don't have one of those guys who we can hit a long ball and target it to, so we have to play a different style. And I'm not saying that we can't go direct at times, right? We actually had success with that. Anthony Robinson would play in early to Balogun and Pulisic and stuff, but to do it every single time, teams are just going to sit in, wait for the long ball, win it back, and come down our throats, right? So you need to be able to have both sides of the game. And again, in a friendly like that, that's the time to try it out, especially against a team like Colombia or Brazil in that case, where these are the teams that you need to beat, right? We can go call Oman and Uzbekistan and play out of the back and look great. We can go do it against Belize and Nicaragua and look great. But that doesn't matter if we can't translate it to the big game. So you can work through those bumps, right? But again, to me, you can kind of put it on tactics a little bit. I don't blame those tactics, so to speak. But that's two goals conceded on two individual errors, right? The Jedi failed clearance, and then the Tim Ream unable to play out of the back, right? Sure. But the U.S. had the better of the play towards the half, right? The ball was in Colombia's end mostly. Pulisic hit the post. Balogun had an opportunity inside the six. Like, it wasn't like it was 2-0 and we're just sitting there absorbing pressure, like the second half of the Brazil game. Like, we played the game and we were very close to chances, right? So clearly something was working tactic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can make the argument that like this is the time where you experiment with
Right.
tactics and you try out new things. But then like I also feel like people have a fair gripe when they talk about Greg's history when playing these teams that we need to be at the level of, where he just does not win these games. Like he just ever so rarely wins these games. So it's like, how many more different tactics are we going to try out and not work until we finally find one that does? Because like the World Cup was an example of it, and I think recent friendlies have been an example of it. But this team is just incapable of beating the level of opponent that we should be competing against. And it's not like we're getting the occasional win and then you have the couple of like one-off blowout games like Colombia, but it's just like the best that we're getting at is like a draw against England, a draw against Brazil. At what point are we taking that final step and winning these games? Because it feels like it is so far and few between.
No disagreements. And we're going to chat about that later. I have a little section about that too. But the reason why I keep going through this stuff is because, and we'll get to it when we get to the end of the game, because I'm going to kind of go through the rest of it here. But everybody at the end of the game is like, Greg lost this game. There are like 7 games in the past year you can say Greg's tactics lost us this game. Netherlands in the World Cup, Trinidad and Tobago in Nations League, right? Like those games, I think it was Nations League. Those games, those are the ones you're saying, yeah, Greg messed that up. He should not have been brought back. We know this. This game was not that game. This game had moments where we were in the game against a team that is equal on ranking. And again, I don't know how the United States are 11th in the world rankings. Like that's absurd to me.
Because
This
we
isn't.
win the Nations League, which is
I
like
would
a
say, yeah,
cakewalk for us.
and that's why I love these. Like, oh, the rankings are like it was the same thing when we played club soccer, right? Like, oh, we're going into the Long Island Cup and we're playing a team that's in the division below us, and or we're going to tournaments and they're ranked on Got Soccer and 17 places higher than them. They're going to be tough. Or it's all just about how much you play and who you're playing and how many wins you're getting, right? So the rankings don't matter, but the fact that we know these teams are going to be good, the teams that we're going to have to get through in the Copa America, these are the games that if you see good things happening, that's a building block. It's not a oh this is garbage, right? Like we get into the second half, and for 15 minutes the ball stayed in their end. They didn't even have a chance on the other end. Like we dominated the first third of the second half and got a goal out of it. We had a bunch of really decent chances. We had a bunch of free kicks that turned into chances and Haji Wright nearly getting one. And then Tim Weah puts one away. Like for a good 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes across the whole game, we looked the better team, which was again not enough to be like, oh, great, bring Greg back on a lifetime contract. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you want to pick out where he's done poorly, this isn't the game to do it because here's where we get down to the end of it. After we score that goal, Colombia comes back down. They're like, all right, we're going to try and score again. And then every single goal they scored after that came because we decided we were going to just dribble out of the back, not play out of the back, dribble out of the back, right? And there's a difference between that. One of the biggest things I learned in college was a list of things you never do if you want to win a game. You never lose the ball on a one-touch pass. You're trying to play quickly. You never lose the ball turning in your own half if you can play negative and keep the ball. And you never, ever lose the ball dribbling out of the back. You cut those three things down, you have a good chance of winning the game. Here's how the last three goals were scored. Everybody's, heir to the number 6 position, Johnny Cardoso, picks up the ball after playing out of the back with two players in the press, and decides to just turn and dribble and dribble and dribble. And really, he wasn't even drilling. He was walking. They come in from behind. They pick him off. We now have 2 defenders against 2 attackers, and we get scored on, right? That's the first goal. And not even counting that, there were 2 other times in the beginning before that goal where they hit us after turnovers. Jedi did the same thing, dribbling out of the back, got it picked off, and we got countered. Turner made a big save. Cameron Carter-Vickers couldn't trap a ball in possession with one person pressing the entire back 4. One person pressing. Couldn't do it, and they hit the post, right? So there are people who are saying, oh, we aren't good enough to play out of the back. Or we need to change our tactics because we're not good enough. If you have all these players who are playing in Europe and this is your level, it can't be MLS players, it has to be European players, and they can't trap a ball playing 4v1 in possession, it's not a system thing, it's a player thing, right? And that's what I was trying to get at when I go down this thing. The fourth goal, Tim Weah is moved to right back because we can't play Shaq Moore because he plays in MLS. Tim Weah would be clear. He picks the ball, he dribbles into the middle of the field, he loses the ball, and Colombia comes down the field and scores again. The fifth goal, Cameron Carter-Vickers playing at the top level in Scotland. He's so much more clear of Miles Robinson and Walker Zimmerman and anybody else. Picks the ball, he passes the ball half speed into the midfield where Colombia step in, pick it off, come down the field and score again. You can blame those tactics, right? Oh, we shouldn't be playing out of the back. We shouldn't be doing, this stuff. We should just be playing direct and whatever. It's all Greg's fault. Absolutely. Go right ahead if you want to. But if that's the level that we have, no tactics are going to fix that. No tactics are going to be like, oh, we're going to make all these players better by just letting them go direct and not playing out of the back and playing a lower level. I don't believe that. Now, people can disagree with me, and that's fine. But I have been in the coaching game for a long, long time. Since I've been going on 15, 20 years now. There's not a thing you can convince me that if we have a system and it is play 4v1 out of the back and those players can't do it, that anything else makes this team good. I won't have it.
No, I mean I think your point is valid. I mean I do want to again reiterate that I fully believe that Greg is not the right person in charge and that I still think that Greg probably had mistakes in this game. Uh, but that being said, I do think the players got off way too easy compared to the criticism that Greg gets, which again, I want to preface by saying I think it's valid criticism like 99% of the time, but the players, from what I at least saw, and again, this is like I feel stupid even saying this, but like from what I saw on Twitter, like because that should be the holy grail. Really, no players were getting any criticism other than like Matt Turner. I saw Turner maybe getting a little slack, but nobody else was getting criticism for the performance. Where a number of players had really bad performances in this game, um, and I feel like it should be fair. I don't think we should harp too much on a single bad performance, but at the same time, I don't think it's unjust to call out a bad performance, even if it's your Lord and Savior or your favorite player in Europe, and the next guy up is an MLS guy, and you don't want to criticize him with the threat of the MLS guy coming in as the substitute. I still think it's fair to criticize them if they have a bad game. Like Chris Richards was the lowest rated starter on SofaScore, and again, obviously that's subjective, but still, he was the lowest rated starter on this entire out of the entire game, but I don't hear like anybody say anything about him or any of the other performances. Like Cameron Carter Vickers, like you talked about, who had the lowest rated performance out of the entire game, and he was a substitute. So
No, and I think that's a great way to put it, right? Like I'm not I'm not doing this whole thing to be like, oh, defend Greg. Greg's the guy. I'm doing this because it's stupid to look at something and then instantly, right? Like if this is the problem, right? We're losing 5-1 to big teams, right? And we're all just saying, oh, it's the manager who can't do it. If you bring in any other manager, it doesn't matter who it is. You can bring in you could pay triple Jesse Marsh's salary. You can go get Jose Mourinho. You could call Alex Ferguson out of retirement. You can go into a lab and take the brain of the best coaches in the last 100 years, put them all together and make the perfect manager. If Cameron Carter Vickers can't trap a ball in possession 4v1, there's no getting back from that, right? Like, and so your point stands, and at a certain level, players need to be held accountable as well, right? And I think I told you this story before. Like somebody was telling me that they needed, it was Greg's fault because he couldn't get him up for the game. I don't believe that in the slightest. I know Greg came out and was like, "Oh, we didn't take them seriously," but I think people were saying, "Oh, Greg didn't prep them properly." I'm at Alfred last year. We have a game that we need to win to ensure the playoffs, and if not, we need a lot of things to go right. Right, we're right at the bottom. We need to get into the playoffs here. We need to win this game. It's away from home against the first place team. We've got history against them. We've gotten into fights with them. They've been all really close games. We prepped these guys for a week. Every session ended with a bit of history. Every session ended with a you got to be focused, do everything right for the next week. We got off the bus. You know what they did for an hour? They played basketball and volleyball and were on their phones and did all the things that they shouldn't have done. We lost. We lost the game 4-0. We were down 4-0 in the first 20 minutes. You're going to sit here and tell me that's a coaching thing because we didn't get them up and ready? Of course not. And these are professionals, so they should be even at a higher level of self accountability, right? Again, I'm not in here to say Greg's the guy, right? There are 100 different games to pick that this is proving that Greg isn't the guy. But this game particularly is a perfect example of why players need to be held accountable as well. Because if you look at Greg Berhalter being the problem here, then Tim Weah dribbling out of the back, Johnny Cardoso dribbling out of the back, Jedi Robinson dribbling out of the back, Cameron Carter Vickers passing to the wrong player. Those problems don't get fixed if you don't hold those players accountable as well. And that's the whole point of this conversation, right? If you follow the progression of events that we just went through today, there are things that weren't great, right? We talked about the tactics, over reliance of wide play, counterattack problems, sure. But you need to hold somebody else accountable as well. There needs to be a player who's held accountable. And again, this is the problem why you can't just get all your news from Twitter, because if there was a single MLS player on the field, all of the hate goes towards that MLS player. But because there wasn't, and they can't talk poorly about their European players, it has to go directly to Greg. And now we're not actually finding the right answers. Now, luckily, I don't think the coaching staff is having that problem. I think they're able to pick apart the game properly. They've been trained properly to say, yeah, the problem is actually the fact that we can't break out of a 4v2 press because our guys are too lackadaisical. Again, unless he went up to the subs who are coming in like, yo, hey Cameron, this is your chance to impress me. But you can't impress me if we have the ball the whole time. Give it to them four or five times and try and defend it. Let me see what you can do. If that was going to be his instruction, okay, fine. You're right. Then this is all Greg's fault. But I struggle to see how this particular game is on Greg Berhalter.
Well, I mean, it's not fully on him.
Yeah, that you're right. I should phrase it that way. He definitely played a part, right, in the beginning parts of the game as we talked about his tactics. But to just be like, oh yeah, nobody else is a problem, and it's all Greg, and if Greg goes, all this goes away. That's yeah. It's not fully his fault, but he does share some blame for sure.
Yep.
Okay, that was my big rant because that was the big. I don't get involved in U.S. men's national team Twitter often, but when I do, it usually pops up. Something like this where we can have a good conversation about it. So,
I don't
uh,
blame you for not getting involved in USMNT Twitter.
dude, me and the guy who is from Pharma podcast from Nashville, we talked all the time. He's like, it's so hard to be a USMNT fan after any game because Twitter makes it unbearable to be on here. And I tweeted back, I'm like, dude, I literally need to like log off for 2 weeks when they're playing, and now there's a whole month of USMNT games. It's gonna be brutal. And he said something like, "Yeah, 2018 was a blessing, really, and we didn't have to watch them for a World Cup cycle. It was really nice."
Yeah, but then you just had to hear about it every time. Oh, this could have been us. Like
Yeah,
reminder that this is why we missed the World Cup. Or
yeah.
well,
And,
you got like what is it? 6 more years before that could possibly happen again. Obviously, we're not hoping for that though. I'd rather deal with the annoying Twitter people and be in the World Cup than miss the World Cup.